Hey everyone, it's Jerry Thompson. Welcome to Unit Own It. It's June of 2026. And today I want to talk about something that occurred in August 2024 and kind of the fallout from it as we proceeded, which is the National Association of Realtors settlement on there was a giant lawsuit back in 2024 that the National Association of Realtors settled. If you remember, there were headlines all over the place, the end of real estate, agents will be charging less commission, and a whole bunch of misunderstanding around the settlement that, as it settled out, has changed the way real estate is practiced today, but has not done what the headlines has shown, which was like crash the industry and sellers would not pay agents and all this other stuff. And I'll tell you why. And in this episode, what I want to talk to you a little bit about is the things today you should know as buyers and sellers and things to watch out for when you're dealing with agents as it relates to the new standards of practice. So let's talk a little bit about what the settlement did briefly. What the settlement did in 2024 is the fundamental, and this is my novice, not legal interpretation, but everything I know as a realtor. Prior to 2024, there used to be what's called the multiple listing system printout, which is computer system ties the member of for example, in Western New York, we have the Western New York Board of Realtors REIS MLS, which means that all realtors join REIS MLS. And when you'd say to me, I'm interested in this house on Girard Avenue in East Aurora, I would be able to run a printout and I would look in the corner. And in the corner of the printout, it would say that I get paid when I sell that house 3% or 4% or 3.5% or 2.5% or whatever the seller and the listing agent had decided to offer to pay an agent to bring a buyer to that house, called a cooperating commission. It used to be, before the settlement, many boards of realtors dictated that in order to participate as an agent and put something on the ML, there had to be a cooperating commission offered. And that's what the premise of the suit was, is that the realtors, in essence, were price fixing because an agent that wasn't being offered commission wouldn't show a seller's house. I mean, if I offered not to pay you to do something, would you do it? Come on. And B, because there could be a variety of those compensations, and the agents knew them, that perhaps an agent might be more inclined to sell the house that paid them more than the house that paid them less. So in order to solve that, the National Association of Realtors said, from now on, we are erasing that. Gone. So when an agent runs a printout for somebody that wants to go show the house in Girard, I, as a buyer's agent or an agent that would go and bring a buyer to that house, have no idea how I'm going to get compensated. And as a second component to that settlement, the flip side, the buyer's side, the National Association of Realtors made it policy that anytime a buyer was going to work with an agent and seeing a house, they needed to be introduced right up front to how that agent was being paid in a buyer's or / showing agreement. Now, this is over time, all of the national companies and local companies have come up with different philosophies on how they were going to do this. But in essence, what it's simply done is create a situation where, when you are thinking about buying something, a good agent following the National Association of Realtors policies should introduce you almost right the first conversation. Look, before we go and show you that house, I think I need to introduce you how I get paid, how I get compensated. And that if I show you that house, I'm going to need a buyer's agreement that says you're willing to work with me on this, and this is what I get paid. Or why don't you come into my office and we can sit down and I can tell you all the things I'm going to do for you. We can come up with an agreement together that shows you how I get paid when you buy a house and what I do in exchange for that. So those were the two changes. One, sellers no longer had compensation if they offered it published in the multiple listing system. And buyers, when you go to a house, an agent needs to, if they are a buyer's agent, they're representing you, need to have an agreement with you. Now, let's talk about kind of what has happened and what you should be aware of if you're thinking about buying or selling, because there can be some pretty big misunderstandings. And if I go on the Facebook or social media, there still are agents that have been in this business for a long time that are debating and aren't quite sure what certain things mean, and agents that are not doing the required agreements the way they're supposed to, and consumers that completely are misunderstand it as well. So I'm going to see if I can translate this a little bit for you so that you know what to look for when you're buying or selling. So if you're thinking about buying a house, the first thing that you should always do is meet with a buyer's agent or meet with an agent you're thinking about hiring as a buyer's agent and find out what they do for you to help you buy the house. That should include help you establish financing, educate you on the different types of financing, conventional VA, FHA, Sonny Mae, any grant programs, cash, same as cash programs. How are you going to get the money? They should be able to help you with that. They should also help you with what are closing costs, what are down payments, what to prepare for. They should help you get pre-approved, get established. They should then set up parameters in which you and them have agreed to search for certain homes together. And on top of those parameters, they should set you up in a way with some notification system that gives you a quick education as to what's hitting the market, what's going on the market, going off the market, going on the market, going off the market. You should get all that right off the bat. Then you and the agent start to pick up times where you see houses on a regular basis. How often that's going to be is part of that conversation. You know that you can question, call, send Zillow listings. When can you call? When will your agent? How quickly can you respond? Or will the agent respond? Can you expect to hear from them the same day? Can you expect to wait 2 days? Are there certain days of the week that they don't call back? Do they not call back after 5 o'clock? All those things are conversations you have with that agent. And if you then agree, let's say you're going to pay that agent 3%, you should sign an agreement with them. I'm hiring you for this. Now, those agreements also say the following, that you as a buyer are willing to pay the agent, or you're going to negotiate that agent's compensation into any offer you make to the seller. So you as a buyer don't necessarily need to write the check. You're writing the check at the closing for the seller anyways. That requires both buyer and seller to understand one significant thing, which is often misunderstood about a real estate transaction. Very much so, and I learned this a long time ago. If you're selling a house, you're sitting over here. Here's my house. Hi. My house right here. You have no money. You have a house. You do not have any money. The house is not giving you a check. You have no money. You have a house. You are selling that house. The house is on the market. The buyer is over here. I'm the buyer. And the buyer has a big, my knuckles are the big bag of cash, has a big bag of cash. And the buyer is saying to you, hey, Mr. Seller, in exchange for this house, I'm going to give you this cash. And then out of that transaction, the real estate agent gets like a little piece of that. So the cash comes to the seller from the buyer, and then the seller pays the agents. That's the traditional way it went. The settlements created a situation where the seller's got the house, the buyer's bringing a bag of cash, and the buyer can pay the agent a little piece, and the seller can pay the agent a little piece. Now, to be clear, if the seller has a house, and let's make this simple. The seller has a house that's worth $100,000, and they were willing to pay a buyer's and seller's agent. And all of a sudden they say, I'm not paying the seller's and buyer's agent. The buyer doesn't just pay more money in the end. They don't just say, okay, I'll pay my agent and I'll pay you the same price. No, they say, part of that value of your house is the services I'm going to get to help buy that house. It's all the extra stuff I'm getting. And the buyer will take a piece of that out of your price in order to pay their agent. So you don't get 100 plus save the commission. You get 100 and pay the commission, or you get less and save the commission. It's not that you as a seller had the money that you're losing. It's that the buyer is bringing the money, and part of the package of money, there's an expense for the management of that money to help them buy that house. When you have a 401k or you have a stock fund or you hire a financial advisor, you may have $100,000. You may pay them 2% to manage that $100,000, not one time, on every year. That's what the buyer's agent brings. They're bringing all of the management in that transaction. So when a buyer decides to hire or retain a buyer's agent, one of the things buyer is this. Let's go back to the buyer side. Is doing is hiring their agent, agreeing to pay that agent a price. Now, the buyer may pay the agent directly if they choose. They can negotiate that compensation with the agent. It can be $1, it can be 10%. That's between the buyer and their agent. When the buyer makes the offer, they can either pay the agent directly or they can ask the seller to pay the agent. How much that buyer's agent gets paid, here's the trick. It's not up to the seller. It's up to the buyer. It's up to what they want to pay for the house and how much they have agreed to pay their buyer's agent. So what can traditionally happen on a buyer side, here's a good education thing, is a seller may, when they list their house with their agent, may decide they're willing to pay a buyer's agent, let's say 2%. If the buyer's got an agreement at 3%, and the buyer makes an offer asking the seller to pay 3%, when the seller counters that offer and says, I'm not going to pay the 3%, there's 1% missing. And the buyer just doesn't say to the agent, hey, you take less, or I'll tell you what, I'm going to pay that seller your money, which in essence is what the seller is attempting to do. The buyer will say, okay, we'll do that. I've got to pay my agent an extra 1% based on my agreement. So I'm going to take that out of your price. The nets end up the same, folks. So there's often a misunderstanding that somehow by not paying a buyer's agent, somehow the seller gets to profit that. That's a old cake. You get your cake and eat it too. You don't get your cake and you can't eat it too. You do not get you don't get somebody that's going to work to help put that entire deal together and manage that entire buyer side of the transaction, and then you get all that money. There's costs to that buyer's agent managing that side of the transaction. And if the buyer pays it directly to their agent, they're usually taking it out of your price. If you pay it, it's in the price, but it's coming out of the price at the closing. It's the same net price to you as a seller. $100,000 paying a buyer's agent is the same. Let's say the buyer's agency agreement is $3,000. It's the same as $97,000 if you don't pay the buyer's agent. That's what you get, Mr. Seller. You don't get $100 and don't have to pay, because the buyer is not going to pay $103. That's not what they offered you. They offered you $100 paying the buyer's agent. And if you say, I want $100, I'm not going to pay the buyer's agent, the buyer can decide, is it worth it to them? Or I'm only going to pay $97 because I only think the house is worth total cost, including the services to buy that house, of $100. So as a buyer, here's what you need to know. When you go to see a house, there is going to be some compensation for your agent, either offered by the seller or offered by you. Otherwise, the agent, who's paying the agent to show up there? They don't work for free. So you need to get an agreement with an agent you like, that's competent, that knows what they're doing. You need to get an agreement with an agent that works in your market. And when you get that agreement, you should clearly understand, what do you get for the money that you're going to be paying in that price of that house when you buy it? Negotiation skills, availability, questions answered. Sometimes 7 days a week, up to 3 months for the closing, sometimes a year. I just showed a house this morning, somebody I've been showing houses to for 18 months. They have not bought one yet. It's not a big deal. I have an agreement with them. Perfectly comfortable with it. But There's hours and hours and hours of time into that. So, as a buyer, a couple red flags to be worried about that occurs in the settlement. If you meet an agent in the house and they don't bring this up at all, they're not following the National Association of Realtors policies, guidelines, or they're representing the seller. They're the listing agent. They don't work for you. Which is one of three ways you can see a house. Go to an open house, go to the listing agent or a seller's agent without any agreement, or get an agent that's going to say to you, look, when I sell you this house, this is how I get compensated. We can negotiate it with the seller, or you can pay me directly. Here in Western New York, most transactions, it's negotiated with the seller. And the reason for that is at the closing statements, it's a lot easier for the buyer to bring one check to the seller's attorney and the sellers to disperse the funds than the buyer to bring a series of dispersed funds checks. Single set check theory, I say. You're closing a house. You want to bring one certified fund to somebody. You might have to bring two or three because of seller's disbursements. You don't want to add another layer. Just pay the seller. The money comes from you to the seller, to the agents. So that's kind of a quick buyer's agent. The red flags should be an agent doesn't bring it up at all. Well, how are they getting paid? And then all of a sudden you make an offer, it shows up in a contract. You didn't agree to that up front. You should have at least had that conversation to know what the compensation would be and sign an agreement, even if it was specific. 2, you do not have to sign a long-term agreement with any agent. If you're going to see a house, it can be a single house showing agreement that says, I'm looking at this house with Jerry, and I'm going to pay this amount if I buy this house. And then right below that in a paragraph or near that in a paragraph should be, should I negotiate that where the seller pays that compensation? I don't have to pay him direct. The seller's going to pay it. But again, remember my diagram. The money comes from the buyer. The seller has the house. The money gets over here. And as it's coming over here, a little piece gets taken by the agents. That's how commissions work. Now, number 2, let's talk about the things that have changed with sellers. And this is where the largest group of misunderstandings has occurred, or differences, maybe would be the right way to put it. There are a number of brokerages have all taken different philosophies, right? Some brokerages have said, we really believe that you should cooperate openly at the beginning, meaning decide right up front, this is what the buyer's agent's commission is going to be. Other brokerages say, nope, just do the list side commission. Let the buyer's agent bring in the second commission. And this is where it can be very confusing for sellers. So when you're thinking about listing a house or putting it in the market, the first conversation you should have with an agent is, what do I get? What are you going to do? What's your systems? What's your experience? How are you going to get me the most money? Second conversation should come up, should be a discussion about how do agents get paid. And that discussion should be two-sided. You're going to be my listing agent. Let's use this way. You're going to be my listing agent. So this is the things you do, and this is how much I pay for that. The other side is there are buyer's agents that are going to bring buyers. In fact, most transactions, most buyers will have their own agent. Are we going to offer compensation to those agents to sell the house? And this is where it gets very confusing. There are people all over online. Since the settlement, you don't have to pay a buyer's agent. Let me tell you, folks, before the settlement, you never had to pay a buyer's agent. You don't need to pay a buyer's agent. Never had to pay a buyer's agent. Why do you pay a buyer's agent? Why would you do that? 71% of buyers in my marketplace are financing their purchase. They do not have an extra 2 to 4% to just throw towards their agent at closing and closing cost. Those 70% of buyers often are willing to buy a house at a better price to make sure that their agent gets compensated for all the hours they've spent with the agent and the effort that agent's going to help them do to manage the transaction. You never had to pay one. But what gets very confusing is when you're interviewing agents, here's what will happen. One agent will say, I recommend the whole paper. I recommend a commission of 6%, let's say. And the reason I recommend that is my side's 3, and then we're going to offer up to 3 for the buyer's side. Now, does that mean you're going to pay 6% no matter what? Nope. And I'll tell you why. The buyer's agents have to have an agreement coming in. And if they're following that policy, when they come in to show the house where you've already planned on paying the whole paper in your price, your offer of compensation is most of the time covers what they're asking for. So when they bring you an offer, you don't go, oh, you mean I have to pay the buyer's agent too? Well, you don't have to pay him. You can say no, you don't need to take the offer. But guess where the money came from? You have the house. The money came from the buyer. So when you're saying I don't want to pay the buyer's agent, you don't get the money without the buyers and the buyer's agent. The money's coming from their side. It's not coming from your house. So where it can get really confusing is it's very easy, depending on the agent you're interviewing, to believe if you interview and an agent says, hey, Mr. Seller, I only charge you the seller's side. My commission is half of what the other guy's is. We're not going to pay the buyer's agent. And whenever I that's said, it reminds me of the snake from the Jungle Book. Trust in me. We're not going to pay the buyer's agent. Come on into the nest. Here's an apple. Whatever. Then his eyes get all glazed over. Oh, I won't have to pay. I won't have to pay. And then all of a sudden you're shocked when you get 5 offers and every offer is asking for you to pay the buyer's agent. You thought you were only paying half. But when the negotiation occurs, you're paying the whole thing. And you go, but I didn't want to pay the whole thing. You weren't paying it to begin with. The buyer was. The money came from the buyer. So, as a seller, when you're interviewing an agent, here's some things to watch out for. A super low commission compensation that doesn't seem to match what you've heard from other people, that doesn't have the potential of the other half being paid in your contract, because the buyer's agency agreement dictates the total compensation. So if a buyer says to you, I know you're not planning on paying my agent, but in this offer that I'm making you, I'm asking you to pay my agent, you end up paying the buyer's agent. And so it can be tricky, because you might talk to an agent that says to you, honestly, this is my commission. This is what I think you're going to end up paying after we're done with the negotiation. And I'll give you very specific circumstances. Things end up a lot different. I just sold a house the other day. We offered a buyer's agent commission. They didn't take it. They said 0. They wanted it off the price. The buyer was paying the agent. I had a house last week. I had 10 offers on it. In the top 4 offers, there were vastly different buyer's agent's commission, even though we offered to pay part of it, but they ranged from very low to very high. So when we were looking at the offers, the seller who had already prepared to pay the full side was actually looking at discounts. Oh, this one's a little less for me, which makes my net a little better. Maybe I'll take that offer instead of the one that's asking me to pay the full compensation. So the buyer side compensation is functionally now negotiable all the way through and is dictated by the buyer's agents coming into the house. Just don't fall for the trust in me. You don't have to ever pay that side, because if you think you're not paying the side, you are eliminating 71% of your market, unless you think 71% of the realtors out there are going to show and sell your house for nothing. Not going to happen. Can you in a popular house get buyer's agents to compete on their compensation? Absolutely. Buyers, can you negotiate the buyer's agent's compensation with your agent? Yes. Can your agent say no to all of it? Yep. It is like any other profession now in a lot of ways. So if you are an accountant and you are very good at your job and you save your clients a lot of money, and then somebody walks in your door and says, I've got $50. Will you take it to represent me as my accountant? Chances are pretty good you're going to go, no, my billable hours are $422 an hour. I expect this. And for your tax job, it's going to be $7,800. Now, could you find somebody at the corner that says they're a preparer to do your work for $50? Sure. Is that the person you want to do it? You're hiring a lawyer. They'll say, my retainer is this. This is my billable hours. You can get, oh, shucks, just got out of law school. I've never done a case like this. ChatGPT will be a great help. I'm $100 an hour. Or you can get the guy that's like, I've tried this case. I've won this case. I know the case law. In fact, I've been part of some of the cases that have created the case law. We're going to win this sucker. I'm $2,100 an hour. You get to make the decision as to which one you want. Real estate works the same way. Well, gee willikers, I've sold 2 houses, but I'll take $500. I've never seen those contracts before. I don't know what they mean, but somebody will help me fill them out, or we'll use ChatGPT to do it. Or you've got somebody that's sold 8 houses. I know the neighborhood in this neighborhood, know what that one sold for, know what that pending's for. I competed for that. I know that house. I can give you the best advice on how to win. I can give you the best advice for financing. I can give you the best advice for that, but I'm going to charge this. You pick which one. And it's nobody in the real estate business is going to, or should, because I don't. If you want somebody that is offering you a discount because you believe that value equals output, that's okay. That's a good thing. That's called the free markets in action. But the settlement has also let some things very open where people can misunderstand. And they can think, well, I'm as a seller, I can just say I'm not going to pay and maybe get the same exposure in the market. Sure you can, but you may not get the same price because the buyers now have to pay out of pocket for the buyer's agent, which could limit the buyers that you have. And also will limit how the buyers are looking at your house as far as closing costs go. You're paying more closing costs on that house. 2 houses side by side. One you're paying more closing costs to, the other you're not. They're exactly the same house. Which one are you going to pay more for? The one that's paying the closing costs for you, the one that's not? Agents are part of the closing costs. Which one are you going to pay more for? They're exact same house. This seller says, don't worry, I'll pay you for the convenience of you having an agent that's going to guide you through every step of the process. I'm going to take care of that bill for you in my house. The other guy says, screw you. Anybody you hire, you got to pay direct yourself. They're both on the market. Which is selling for more quicker? It's up to you to make that decision. That's not me. So the settlement itself has proven to be largely structural, educational. It has also opened some scenarios where people don't understand. And they end up in situations where a buyer looks at a house and gets caught. These are few things I don't advise anybody to do. You want to see a house, you're desperate. You click on Zillow. Bing, bing, bing. I want to see a house. Agent meets you at a house and they bring a contract to you. And it's a 3-month contract. It's not limited to the house. It's charging 5% or some number that may not be market reasonable in the market. You sign it, and now you're stuck with that person that you just arbitrarily got by hitting a button. Don't do that. If you're going to hit a button and try to show up at a house, talk to the agent either via phone right away. Say, what kind of agreement do I need? Make it limited until you know that agent. Know, love, and trust that agent, and know that they're worth the money. Do not commit to the agent till you know, love, trust, know they're worth the money, know they're better than anybody else, and that they're of value to you. then sign a long-term agreement. Other than that, do it house by house. No good agent should demand a long-term agreement the first time you meet them and they meet you. Maybe if you spend an hour and a half in their office talking about things and you decide you really want to hire that agent right there on the spot, you just know it. You've been recommended by a trusted friend, but they shouldn't just race out somebody you just got arbitrary, what I call Amazoning. You hit the button, I want agent, show up at house, agent shows me house. If they bring out a form, you should look at the form. Make sure it does not tie you to the agent. I had a scenario a couple weeks ago where somebody called me and only in New York, and they had done that. And they didn't want that agent anymore, but they were stuck with that agent for 60 days. And they had called me and wanted to talk to me and interviewed me on the phone and said, geez, you're so much, you've learned so much in 5 minutes. Let's do this. And I said, you have an agreement with the other agent. You either got to get out of it or I'm going to have to say, good luck to you until that agreement runs out. That is something to be concerned about as buyers. Sellers, understand your listing agreement. Understand that there are two sides to it. There's three, actually. There's the total that you could pay, which can change based on the buyer side. Seller side, which is a side that's not going to change. That's going to be what you're paying for the marketing of your house and the agent that represents you. It will change based on the agent. Some of them will take less, some will take more, just like I told you. Jay Willigers has never sold a house before, but I got a sign and pick up over Home Depot. It's going to be $80. If they have value to you, you go right ahead. Or look at what the buyer side in your agreement is. Because as a listing agent, I don't care what you want to put in the buyer side. I will make recommendations to you as to what you should in order to get the most net dollars in your pocket, which is different. Okay. But if you don't want to pay a buyer's agent, you want to eliminate 71% of your marketplace, I want you to know one thing before you list it with me. I'm going to explain to you all those things. If somebody's not explaining it to you, they're doing it for purposes that perhaps would make their pricing look more attractive than it's going to end up being. It's the old auto lease trick. Lease this brand new Mercedes 300 SL for $249. And then you go to the dealership and it's $24,822 in closing costs to get that lease. And then the real cost is $1,242 a month, not $249 a month. So understand the real cost and what they could be and the range of costs that they could be as you enter into real estate negotiation as a seller. Do not fall for the low-hanging fruit. Do not fall for the trust in me. This is going to be the end of the industry. You're going to get these huge discounts, because fundamentally there's a cost to everything, and you get what you pay for in real estate the same way you do every other industry. You get what you pay for. There are quality windows. There are poor windows. There are nice doors. There's nice flooring. There's poor flooring. There's poor doors. You get to make that choice. You get to decide. That's the beauty of this entire settlement. But just make sure you understand you don't get the Mercedes at the Hyundai price. I hope this helped. The data shows in the 9 settlement the last 2 years, the overall industry commissions have gone up, not gone down, right? Little teeny tiny bit. And that's primarily because now on the buyer side, agents are more free to dictate the terms of what the relationship is. If you are a buyer, meet with an agent, sit down, learn how they get paid, learn what they do, hire one only after you know you really like them, you want to work with them, you're compatible, you trust them, and they're worth the money. And then as a seller, understand what you are agreeing to on the seller side, understand what you're agreeing to offer on the buyer side, and understand the whole picture. Do not fall for the we're only going to pay the seller side trick, and then all of a sudden later be dealt with dealing with what a buyer side is asking for, and then you haven't planned for that expense. Because 71% of the time they're going to be non-cash offers. They're going to need to probably finance or make an offer that includes you to pay the services that they're getting from that buyer's agent during the closing process. So thank you for listening to You Own It again, and I wish you well, and I'll see you next month. Thank you so much for tuning in to You Own It. Don't forget to take a look at the show notes for any resources mentioned during the show. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe on YouTube, follow us on your favorite podcast apps, and turn on your notifications so you have access to the latest and greatest. All of our social channels are clickable in the show notes as well. I'd also like to remind you to check out our website, c21jerry.com. There you'll find more info on me as well as my latest listings for all of Western New York. Thanks for tuning in. Remember, through any big decision, you own it.